We are back with more breaking news. Donald Trump's effort to drastically reduce the federal workforce has hit a snag in court. On Friday, a federal judge temporarily blocked the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau from firing employees without cause. However, the White House says more than 75,000 federal employees have accepted a so-called deferred resignation offer. Those who stepped down were told they'll be paid through September. It is not clear whether that promise will actually be kept. Meantime, the Trump administration is pushing federal agencies to fire probationary employees. Now, we should note these workers who have been on the job for only 1 or 2 years before all their civil service protections have kicked in. Probationary status is not a reflection of someone's job performance. Back with us, Joe Walsh and Angelo Corazon.
Can I just, I used to be a federal employee. My dad was a federal employee.
I'm sorry, when you were the lieutenant governor of...
No.
I'm about to say.
No, when I was younger.
Okay.
I had life before being LG.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you weren't claiming to be a government employee as lieutenant governor.
No, I worked in the congressional office on the Hill, and I worked at the U.S. Naval Lab. So my point is, coming out of a family with federal employees, the Washington Post helps us understand a little bit better what we're talking about here. Occupations across the federal workforce run the gamut. The government employs aerospace engineers, museum curators, and riverboat operators, and people who handle everything from the toxic materials for missiles to cleaning dirty laundry. Despite common misconceptions, federal workers do not live in and around Washington, D.C. While the nation's capital and its surrounding suburbs may symbolize the federal bureaucracy Trump and Musk seek to slash, most of the federal workforce, more than 85%, live elsewhere, work elsewhere. They're in your backyard, America. So the thing that you hate so much, and Angelo, this is the part I don't get my head wrapped around. The thing that people hate the most is the thing they need the most. And the neighbor next to them is the one who's providing that services, who gets up and goes into an office to process their paperwork, to, as was noted, pick up their trash and do other things. Talk about that side of this from what you're picking up in your reporting and coverage of this. How much of this part of the story is not getting absorbed by the people out there, I think, the way it should be?
It's not. I mean, people just don't realize it. They honestly don't know. I mean, even when they start to feel the immediate effects of it, like a contract got canceled, or even their ability to get information that they would have gotten easily up, 3 months ago, slows down all across the country. They don't really understand what's going on. They're not drawing their connection back to Trump, and that's because the overwhelming part of this story is that they've always, the right wing has always portrayed government employees as sort of in this imperial city, making lots of money on the backs of the American worker, and that was a core part of Trump's campaign. I mean, he announced his reelection in Waco, which was a site of a massive anti-government attack. He said, I'm going to be an instrument of revenge. So these cuts are not designed to actually, create a lot of savings in the federal government. What they're designed to do is appear as and be an instrument of revenge. And so they lump in, a lot of the workers that you talked about, but the average person who's listening to talk radio every day and has been, hopped up on right-wing media for decades, the impression that they have of a federal workforce is people making a lot of money by overtaxing them and not doing a lot of work. And that's where the story that Trump and the administration and Musk and X and their echo chamber, they're able to push that and mask the real harms. But we just, Democrats shouldn't sit idly by it either. They need to recognize that we live in a different landscape and be able to draw attention to where those pain points are, because those are the people that individuals rely on the most. This should be the easiest story to tell if you sort of reorient and shift to the current moment. But that's how it's playing out day to day.
I was just going to say, and by the way, Angela's right. I used to do some of that right-wing fear-mongering. Democrats need to tell these stories. Democrats need to talk like regular people and not politicians. Democrats need to display some righteous anger. Look, everything Trump's doing, firing and furloughing these employees, is also illegal and unconstitutional as well. The courts need to do their job. But in the meantime, Democrats need to be an opposition party and talk like regular people and tell these stories. 4/5 of federal workers work out there, out in the country somewhere, not in D.C.
This is true. My father tested I was not a government worker. I guess I was when I worked at the White House, but that was very different, honey. That's the 1%. I finally get to be a part of the 1% for like 5 seconds. But my father tested the water. He worked for the Army Corps of Engineers, and his job was to test the water, which is why I don't drink tap water to this day, honey. But like those are the jobs. And you've got AFG who put out a statement about these probationary firings. These firings are not about poor performance. There's no evidence these employees were anything but dedicated public servants. They are about power. They are about gutting the federal government, silencing workers, forcing agencies into submission to a radical agenda that prioritizes cronyism over competence.
That's what Angela was saying.
That's exactly what you were saying. So I guess, Angela, my question is, then are the rallies outside the government agencies? Is this what Democrats should be doing? I mean, do you think being locked outside the Department of Education, trying to get in the doors, is what more do you think they should be doing?
Oh boy. Look, I mean, I don't think they should be feeding into a narrative of impotency, and that's sometimes when they do, it's both a day late and a dollar short. They show up, 2 days after the news cycle, and then they look weak. And what do I think they should be doing? Exactly what the congressman said before, which is starts connected to harms. They cut money for children's hospitals across the country, massive operating budgets. Children's hospitals are literally in the process of laying off staff and reducing care for sick children, something that should be the easiest and most sympathetic thing to build support for. Show up there across the country. Don't show up in D.C. at a door that's locked that you can't get into so that the narrative is, look, they can't do anything to protect us. They can't even get into their own buildings. No, go to a children's hospital and show them what it means for the people that are there taking care of it. And that's one small example. Show up to the farmers in Missouri who just had their contracts canceled from the Inflation Reduction Act because of these reckless cuts that the Trump administration is doing, and say, look at this. This guy's out $300,000 is going to lose his farm because these people are just cutting with reckless abandon. That is what I think Democrats need to be doing. And unless they're willing to show up in those places that matter, then they're either relying on others or the media to connect those dots. And it's partly not their job. The media is not the opposition party. They have a role to play in storytelling and journalism, in fact, in fact-based reporting, but they're not the opposition. The Democrats are, and they need to be the ones to connect those dots.
Come on now, the Democrats come on now.
He just brought church on Saturday.
I'm about to pull the collection plate up.
I could not agree with that more. And I would say if you want to do it right, what you do is you go to that hospital in Alabama where the local congresswoman has just complained about the possibility of that being closed. Show up there and ask that Republican member to stand with her, with you, and talk about why Donald Trump wants to close this hospital.
Again, Angelo, I cannot shout it more from the mountaintops. Democrats are the opposition party. They're not the resistance, okay? I need the Democrat elected officials to act like the opposition party in this country. Former Congressman Joe Walsh, thank you. Angelo Carson, thank you. Come on here and take a photo with us.